What are you drinking there? Anything exciting?
Just my favourite, Charlie's lemon, mandarin and lime.
I just tried these Bundaberg what are they? Spiced ginger beer.
Oh yeah, they're good. Yes, yes, yes.
I just smashed a 6 pack of those.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you, getting to like you, getting to hope you like me.
Hi, my name's Will. So here we are about to step into the world that is James Woods. I know him as a bassist for Beastwars and have met him on several occasions when he was performing the role of sound engineer at various venues. Seeming like an interesting guy with many stories, I asked him if he'd consider having a chat about all things James, to which he agreed. So here we are.
Happy to be here.
I never really know how to sort of start these sort of one-on-one interviews, but I thought we might begin with the questions that are to do with your sort of childhood and your journey into becoming a musician or sound engineer. So, how did you first get into being a muso and a soundie?
My mother and my stepfather always had music in the house. I had a little 7-inch folding thing, suitcase thing that I played 7 inches on, and I remember sitting there listening to my stepfather had Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here on both sides of a C90, and I'd just sit there with the headphones on and flip that over from the age of like 4 or 5. So I've always been listening to music. It's always been really important. And then my mother played she had a nylon string guitar. She did finger picking. She just used to play songs and sing along to them. So she'd sing to me when I was a baby. So um, I kind of picked that up and learned a few chords. And then, like 13, so I'd sort of started listening to the um, stuff like the D Kennedys and Black Flag, and I was quite into punk. I grew up with Zeppelin and stuff like that, and Sabbath and things. Oh, my mum took me to Narrawahia Festival when I was 2.5. And I
Nice.
say she had me on her shoulders when Black Sabbath played. So when I first heard Sabbath, it was like, oh my God, I gotta know. I know this in my heart. Anyway,
Awesome.
I picked up and started sort of playing bar chords to Dirty Rotten Imbecile songs and really basic thrash punk, and then heard really early Sonic Youth and Velvet Underground and went, oh, you can just feedback. You don't even need to play chords, because I'm not a shredder. And so I just started feeding guitars back and recording myself and jamming with a schoolmate out at his farm because we were in Wanganui. Spent my second decade in Wanganui. I would have preferred to be in Auckland for my second decade, because when I was a teenager, all of that great stuff was going on up there. Glue Pop was happening. Bands like Enigma were coming out. All that
All right.
early, yeah, all that early
The
thrash and
thrash
punk
stuff.
up there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was a good scene that I'd go and stay up there with my dad. But yeah, I probably would have got into really bad shit. Yeah, um, I did anyway. But all of my friends went to university. I had left school. I left school in the seventh form because they asked me to cut my hair. And I said no. So yeah, I had a job at an apprenticeship. That was 1988. There was a massive stock market crash. A whole bunch of companies went under, including a company that I had an apprenticeship with, in electronics. And so, it was I was building myself little amplifiers and shit like that as well. Um, I went down to Canterbury University with where my mate who played music was, and he was saying, "Come down, there's great bands, these Axel Grinders, these Into the Void." There was a good music scene down there, and like this was '89. And while I was there, um, I was studying, and I realised that if I kept studying, I'd have to work really hard to be any good, or I'd just end up with a BSc and be a lab technician. And the guy who put on the the student activities coordinator at Canterbury University was Paul King, who plays bass in the Bats. He used to play bass in The Enemy, which is one of those original Flying Nun punk bands Chris Knox was in. He's a top bloke. I basically owe my career in sound to him. Putting this ad in the student rag saying, anyone who wants to learn to mix, come and help me haul these PAs around and we'll teach you. And I went to him and said, yeah, I'm keen. And he was like, 12 other people. Yeah, all right, come on. And so, of course, me and 12 other people turned up on Saturday, and he said, right. And it was, back then it was Sound Men. It's now Sound People. So they dropped off their double 15 in horn and double 18 subs, racks of Carver amps, little mixing desk, bunch of bi-amp wedges. They dropped all them off. And Paul was like, right, we need to take these up these 2 flights of stairs to the upper common room, and then we'll show you how to set it up. And me and one other guy went, sweet, that's why we're here. Hauled this, the soundmen guys, Bart and Murray, showed us how to coffin lift, tip them over, lift them, carry them up the stairs. Bart Barkman as well. He taught me he'd be there with sound people, soundmen, and Murray, and I'd ask them ridiculous questions, and he'd stand there and patiently explain what was going on. But yeah, the next week, only 2 of us turned up because everyone was like, we don't want to lift this shit up the stairs. And it's like, that's why I'm here. I'm here to lift this shit up the stairs and figure out how to use it. So I did that while studying. And then the next year, Paul offered me a job taking care of that same PA in the upper common room and down in the, there was a little outside area. So we'd do 2 or 3 bands at lunchtime. And then we take the PA up to the upper common room and do 3 bands at night. And we did that for, I think it was like a 10-day orientation, because I was studying physics and maths and stuff at uni. And it's like, I'm using the stuff that I'm learning, but I'm using it to do awesome shit. There were really cool bands playing there. And then a chap by the name of David Merritt, who's a traveling poet who also used to tour manage a lot of the early Flying Nun tours around New Zealand. Because I was quite into all of that stuff too. I was into the indie and the punk scene. I was also into metal. I'm into all sorts of music. I like music of all forms, as long as it's good. I really do not care. I like orchestral music. I like opera. I'm not so keen on musical theatre. But I have mixed a lot of musical theatre. I've also, it's great fun to mix.
Part of the problem about being sort of a live sound engineer is that you're quite often subjected to things that you are not necessarily into yourself.
But this is the thing. It's going to be over in an hour. Never have to see it again.
True.
And you have the thrill of anything could fall apart. So, like doing musical theatre, for example, you've got 30 radio mics, so you've got a 20-piece orchestra, you've got 2 consoles that you're mixing it on, 3 levels of theatre with delay rings in that theatre. You've got an incredibly complex mix of channels coming in and mixes coming out and processing to control it. And keeping a handle on that is so much fun. And following scripts, you need to follow the script and follow the dialogue. You need to know the show. You need to fault find because they're moving around, they're getting sweaty. Radio mics getting full of sweat, crapping out, popping and cracking. You've got guys backstage who you're messaging, going, that pop I think was so and so, and they're like, yeah, we saw that. We're getting them as soon as they get off stage. We're going to change it out. It's really cool.
I guess you're so busy focusing on what's happening with all the equipment that you wouldn't even really notice the show, I guess.
You'd think that, but no, you go to sleep singing the songs and you wake up with the songs in your head. You know that show intimately, every line of that show, and you love it. And then it finishes and you never think of it again.
You're obviously one of these people who tells a story, but never in a direct, in a straight line. So I'll kind of drag you back onto the tracks, and I was going to ask you the next question. What does an average week look like from your perspective? Before we did the interview, I asked you if you had like a day job and you did this on the side, but in fact you are a full-time sound engineer. So
I am a full-time sound engineer.
So it's pretty much, is it every day of the week or?
Yeah, it's every day of the week.
Okay.
I do quite a lot of corporate stuff just because I really don't care what I'm doing. I have a set of skills and I can put them to use. I see myself as a tradesman. Sometimes you're jib stopping an apartment block that you really don't care about, and sometimes somebody comes to you and says, "Can you build this beautiful cabinet for me?" You know, and sometimes you're doing renovations on your best mate's house. You know, so
Corporate gigs also pay very well.
and they're generally like 8 till 5, so they're quite respectable hours. They 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 do pay a lot better, although I charge the same across the only place I do not charge is Valhalla. I do 1 day a week at Valhalla, and I can't do any more than that because I would go even more deaf doing loud music all the time, and also yeah, I can make so much more money. And I'm not being greedy there because like I'm one of the better sound engineers in the country. Some people probably dispute that, but I don't, you know, like I'm quite experienced. I charge good money. Anyway, stumbled over that one. My point is, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm pretty good. We don't make a lot of money.
Hmm.
All of my friends I went to school with who are my age and have been doing a job as long as I have are earning at least twice what I'm getting, bare minimum twice what I earn a year. Quite often 3 times what I earn. You know, so I'm on under 100K a year, which is like, mate, I'm so happy with what I earn. I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying I have to kind of think about feeding my kids and paying a mortgage.
No one would dispute that, you know, like money is important in this society, and if you're working full time and not earning very much, life's way harder.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got a specialist skill set like yours that takes decades to like really nail it down.
It's interesting because I think most of the people I know who are good sound engineers have been good sound engineers from day one. They know how to pull a good mix, or no, let me rephrase that. They know what a good mix is, and they can kind of get it there. It's learning tricks and learning shortcuts and learning really specific things to make it sound the way you want. It's a calling. It's like a vocation, I think is the word. It's a thing that you choose to do.
Right.
And also, like another thing about like Valhalla, for example, clubs like that are places where young people go and craft their skills. It's like I've long maintained that if you want to become a good sound engineer, then you either go on tour with a band or you work for a PA company with one PA or, you know, a couple of PAs, or you are in a venue. So either way, you've got one thing which is consistent all the time, and then you have a whole bunch of other stuff which is changing around it.
I was out of the country for about a decade, over a decade before sort of Beastwars had sort of risen to fame and had worldwide recognition, etc., etc. So I kind of missed the whole thing. And when I came back to New Zealand, there was this big band called Beastwars from New Zealand, and I was like, oh, like I'd completely missed it. And you know, I've got a couple of your albums, and you know, awesome band.
Thank you.
So yeah, I've sort of got some questions about the sort of the origins of the band that I missed out on. So the first question is sort of, were you one of the founding members?
Yeah. So no, but yeah. Clayton and NATO got together, and they were sitting there one night in Matterhorn Bar talking about how there were no bands like The Cult or Queens of the Stone Age in Wellington. And apparently, story goes that Sam Scott was sitting next to them. Sam Scott from Phoenix Foundation, who's a fairly successful Wellington band, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll never do that," you know. And they were like, "Okay, all right then." NATO also, Nathan, is a bass player, and he wanted to learn to play the drums. The band that I was in that supported Ladyhawk, we played at Sanfran. We're pretty shambolic, and he was like, "Cool, that guy could make a noise, and you know, doesn't mind being in a shambolic band if we're shambolic." So he hassled me. Well, we did. He was kind of like, "Come on, jam," and I was like, "Oh, okay." yeah. I'd love to. And and it's like 3 or 4 times. And the very last time I remember was I was walking through Civic Square with my son in a pushchair, and he'd just been born. And I ran into NATO, and he was like, "Come and fucking jam." And I went, "Okay, all right, this Thursday, I think it was, or whatever." And so I went up and jammed with them. They had a bass player who basically, I think they did one gig at San Fran with this bass player. I don't know if they were called Beastwars at that point. I don't, because that came out a little bit later. Um, and then he moved to Auckland, so they were once again left. And now Matt saw them play and went up to NATO drunkenly and went, "You guys need a singer, and that's me." And so he joined the band.
Just like that.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think the first jam that I had might have been the first or the second jam that Matt had with them as well. And it was Clayton and NATO, who seemed like they had a kind of a thing, a song or two that they were jamming, or maybe it was something new that they made up. But there was just this point that when their first jam, and we were just doing this kind of thing, kind of Stoogesy, kind of, you know, rocky, kind of cult, Queens of the Stone Age thing. And NATO accented the cymbals, did a roll, we all changed to the same note, and Matt kicked to the air and did this howl. And I was like, fuck yeah, this is great. You know,
Instant chemistry, perhaps.
it was just kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm not a technical bass player, but I really like a good feel. And NATO has an amazing feel on the drums. I guess because he was just figuring it out. So he didn't have things that he was doing that are typical drummer things. He was just working out how to play the drums, and he played it like a bass player.
Keeping it kind of simple, keeping it kind of to the groove as opposed to sort of showing off or overthinking things, maybe.
Yeah, Clayton and I share a love of, like, for example, I mentioned Sonic Youth earlier and their sort of crazy stuff. I really like early Sonic Youth when they were detuned and um, quite dark, quite evil sounding, and, like, a little bit sort of, they had that kind of no wave New York thing going on. And he really loved Sonic Youth after the period where they lost all of their guitars and they had to figure out how to play all their songs in standard tuning. And I think they sound like a college rock band. But we both think that Sonic Youth are great. We both love the Birthday Party and Roland S. Howard, but I like the kind of the bluesy, punky, dirty, junky Birthday Party, and he likes the gothy kind of poppy Birthday Party. So once again, we both agree that that noise is good noise. So Clayton and I think, really gel there. And we just we basically we had this one jam and we just went, oh, let's just do this every week. So we'd turn up, Clayton would have a bottle of wine, Matt would have a 6-pack, I'd have a couple of beers from Garage Project down the road, NATO would have a couple of, craft beers, and I might have a little toot, and just have like a, you needed that out, thanks. But it really was just like basically poker night.
By toot, you mean you had a baby trumpet?
Yeah, a little trumpet.
It was kind of like an organic experience rather than, yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Gotcha.
hey, we've got like 6 songs. Let's do a gig. And we did a gig, and our friends and family came along, and like my sister said to me, "Oh, you guys are actually really good." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Oh, let's do another gig then." And then we started noticing that we didn't know any of the people at the shows. Strangers were turning up, and it was like, oh.
You just did a bunch of Melbourne shows. How did that go?
Melbourne is like our second home. Our Wellington shows and our Melbourne shows are the best ones. We did like in 2016 or 2014 or something. We went over there for 5 days or 6 days and played 5 shows, back to back, and had great audiences. So we played at Cherry Bar. James Young orchestrated us getting over there from Cherry Bar. He's been a huge help to us the whole time, actually. So he orchestrated us going over there and playing Cherry Bar, and then we played at another one of his bars, which is way out of town. Apparently it's an up and coming place. Played with Droid there. We didn't. There was no support, I think, at Cherry Bar. It was just us.
Were they all sold out shows?
The Cherry Bar sold out. The other one at the other bar didn't, but there was a lot of stuff happening that night. I found out there were a lot of bands playing. It sold pretty well. It was like maybe 100 off pack capacity or something like that. I don't know.
That's good enough.
Well, yeah, mate. It was great, and we sold a crap load of merch, and we always seem to do well with merch. And then the last night was at a garage punk festival, and I fucking love me some garage punk. And we got a bit loose. Maybe some of us might have had a little bit much to drink, but it was the kind of show where things could be like that and just make a bunch of noise. Yeah.
What do you think 2023 holds for you? And do you have any big plans or projects in the pipeline for next year?
I play in a cross punk D-beat band with Matt Jwed, who runs Razor Draw, and a guy called Christian, who plays an Emboss, and Ghidra, and right. Matt also goes out with EJ. So, and regular viewers of your channel will know that Christian and EJ were on your channel earlier, and they're in Emboss. So, and NATO plays drums in Emboss. So it's quite a
incestuous.
We're all good friends around here. Yeah, hey, yeah, we're all good friends around here. We've done a bit of recording. We've kind of hit a bit of a hiccup. It wasn't quite working. We've only been practicing for maybe a few months, 6 months or something. I don't know. But I run a little practice space / studio. I've got one half, which is a studio, and Matt runs the practice space next door. It's a tiny room, but that's where we jam, and we've been recording like Matt's other bands there. We've been recording bands like Total Violation, Knifed, so sort of punk, thrash, grindcore bands, and that's been really fun because I'm a live engineer, and when I've tried to do recording and apply the same rules, it doesn't sound as I'm applying rules that I use to make things sound powerful through a PA system in a room.
Yeah.
And Matt is one of those really sort of trashy. We record on a Porter studio, and is really trashy, white noisy. And so between us, I'm seeing how he's making things a lot more aggressive than I can make them, and I'm making things a lot more full and have a little bit more body and power to them. So that's quite fun. We're doing recordings with him there and playing in the band with him, and we've just kind of decided to try a different rehearsal schedule and do a little bit more work. So actually practicing the songs until we know them again. And he's like, oh, that seems like work. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not very punk, but it's kind of I think we'll be better. So keeping rehearsing with that, keeping those bands going, and recording other bands in a really, really simple, basic way. Like we're recording Piss Baby, which is a cool kind of, I think of them as hardcore punk, but they've got breakdowns. Piss Baby are cool. So we're recording them, we're recording some other people. Beastwars have I just finished laying down bass tracks for, I think I'm allowed to tell you, we're recording a bunch of songs that we love from New Zealand history. Like there's some Julia Deans in there, there's Marlon Williams, there's some sort of old punk like Children's Hour and the Gordons. We've turned the Gordons into this kind of 90s industrial thing. Clayton's about to put the guitar on, and I think the plan is to tour that later next year.
Thanks very much for giving me a little view into your world. It was very informative.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, it was cool. Thank you for having me.
I'll see you next time I'm down in Wellington, I guess. Maybe.
Hey, when's that?
I don't know. Maybe when I don't have COVID. Maybe. Maybe next year
Oh, shit.
sometime.
Oh, how's that going?
Oh, loving it.
Take it easy.
Thanks for watching.